The jury that is deciding the fate of the man accused in a murder trial that has really captured the nation, the killing of two teenagers in Delphi, Indiana. Jurors preparing for their fourth day of deliberations after working through part of the weekend. Is a verdict imminent, though? ABC's Ike Ajachi is following it all. Ike, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Gio. The jury has now deliberated for 14 hours over the span of 3 days in the double murder trial of Richard Allen, a process that will continue into next week. More than 7 years after the brutal murders of two teenage girls in Delphi, Indiana captured the headlines, this morning, verdict watch in the trial of Richard Allen. The jury has been deliberating for over 14 hours. This after 17 days of seeing evidence and hearing testimony about the killings of 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German in 2017. Allen has pled not guilty. In their closing arguments, the prosecution showing the jury the infamous Bridge Guy video that Libby captured on her phone just moments before she was killed near the Monon High Bridge. Prosecutors say it's Richard Allen's face and voice. 52-year-old Allen, a Delphi local who worked in town at CBS, self-reported to police being at the bridge just days after the girls were found. Despite being interviewed, he didn't become a suspect until 5 years later due to his statement being put in a filing cabinet with the wrong last name. It wasn't discovered until 2022 by a volunteer clerk. Prosecutors say they tied Allen to the crime by linking a bullet found at the murder scene to his gun, and that Allen confessed to the killings about 60 times while behind bars awaiting trial. The defense slammed the state's case, saying the ballistics testing and the investigation was bumbled, and that Allen was not in his right mind during those prison confessions after spending 13 months in solitary confinement, telling the jury that the United Nations defines any more than 15 days as torture. Now, media is not allowed in the courtroom since deliberations began, so it's unclear if the jury has had any questions or notes for the judge. There are no deliberations today, and the jury will return tomorrow at 9 a.m. Guys.
All right. Thank you for that. Ike, joining us now to talk more about the case is ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, thanks for being here with us. The jury got the case on Thursday. They spent 2 full days deliberating. What do you think that they're focusing on, and what evidence do you think that they're struggling with? Because this is a tough one. It could be.
Yeah, so like Ike said, the media is not in there, so we don't even know what notes they're passing on to the attorneys and the judge to figure it out. So it's like reading the tea leaves without the leaves. But in terms of the evidence, for the prosecution, they've got the fact that they have these 60-plus confessions from Richard Allen, something that I think that the jury is really struggling with. Of why would you confess this many times to a crime unless you did it? But for the defense, there's no forensic evidence that actually ties Richard Allen to the scene. There's no DNA, there's none of his blood or anything. When you think of a gruesome crime like this, you think, at least he'd leave something, right? And I think that's what they're really struggling over between those two sides of the case.
I know oftentimes we're often looking at how long a jury has a case. And in this case, we're looking at this and saying, well, they seem to be very engaged. Does that tell you anything? Yeah, so don't forget, this jury is sequestered. And so they're not going home. They've been sequestered since October 18th. They're working 6 days a week. Unlike most jurors that get to go home at the end of the day, they get the weekend off. And so they seem really engaged. And then in Indiana, unlike where I practice in New York or in the Southern and Eastern District of New York, the jurors actually get to ask questions of the witnesses throughout the case. And they've been asking questions, engaged. And so we can see that they're really participating in this. And I think for this community, even though this jury is not from this community, they're really trying to get to the answer of who killed these 2 young girls.
And what about the possibility of a partial verdict if the jury is still struggling?
Yeah, so verdicts come in different forms, right? You can get guilty on all counts, not guilty, but of course, as you're mentioning, there's a partial verdict. And I think that is possible in a case like this, although probably more possible for a mistrial at this point. A partial verdict could be them saying, you know what, I think Richard Allen murdered these girls, but I didn't think he murdered them in an attempt to try to kidnap. Maybe the prosecution didn't prove the kidnapping aspect of it, but just the murder. So you can get guilty on some counts and not guilty on others. Or like I said, I think after this amount of time, mistrial is probably more of the question on everyone's lips right now.
Wow, definitely something to watch. Brian, thank you so much. As always, we appreciate it.